Hello everyone, my name is Meghan LeVota. I'm an ENxJ, and I got a question from Bryce who asked me, how can we learn to appreciate our blind spot function or our point of least resistance PoLR function in socionics? And Bryce said that he has a hard time appreciating his SI blind spot. And I feel you there, Bryce. I also have an SI blind spot. So for those of you who have a question similar to this or have wanted to ask me a question, please comment your question below. I'm going to be doing videos like this weekly where I dive deeper into one of your questions. So just to get everyone on the same page, the word blind spot is sort of thrown around there in Myers-Briggs communities as, your seventh function. It is, so for example, me as an ENxJ, I prefer FE, then NI, then SE, then TI. That is my cognitive stack in Myers-Briggs. In socionics, model A has those functions in a slightly different order, but it's still similar in the sense that I still prefer FE and then NI in that order as far as what my dominant function is. And in socionics, there's this thing called the point of least resistance, which is your vulnerable function. It is the blind spot. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And just sort of share some of the things that I've noticed about this. So I personally, in regards to how I bump up against SI in my life, I don't tend to like it. I really do not like it when I see it in other people. It's interesting, in socionics, the ISTJ, or the SITE type would be my conflictor, whereas the ISxJ, or the SIFE type, would be, I think, my supervisor. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm like 99% sure that's accurate, but correct me if I'm wrong. It's interesting because I tend to view ISxJs as this sort of person who can help me with my weak spots, where ISTJs are these people that are just annoying and doing everything wrong according to my view. And I think that understanding type and the fact that we all have a blind spot is the first step to really appreciating and understanding people who are different from you. Because at least for me, what I think is like, okay, SI is really annoying to me, but from other people's perspective, my FE is really annoying to them. And I know how it feels when ISTJs and INTJs, when they have an FE blind spot. I know how it feels when they underestimate what I'm talking about, because they are pretty much underestimating the value of what FE even is. They pretty much have this view where they don't need it. They don't need it. And so the fact that you are so focused on it, it's like, why? And I think that's the thing with everyone's blind spot, is that from your perspective, you don't need it. It's that thing that you just don't think about it. And it's like, if you realize that, everybody can do everything, and these are just, the way our preferred functions and our strengths are what we tend to focus on and prefer, and we are strong in, and it is sort of where our ego attaches to itself, and it is, of a higher consciousness, one could say, whereas these other functions are more in the subconscious territory. If we can look at it from a bird's eye view and just really realize that, okay, so SI, from my perspective, is irrelevant, because I already can get the job done with FE and NI. But from an SI user's perspective who has stronger SI, Perhaps they think NI is irrelevant because they can already get the job done with SI. So there's a few things to think about. Is that one, what does getting the job done even mean? Do we have different goals to begin with? Which that could be very much true. We might be focused on completely different goals. But at the same time, even if we are focused on the same goal, every function can get the job done. That's something I very, very firmly believe, and you'll see this sort of belief bleeding into all of my videos, is that every type can do everything, and we all can get the job done with our set of functions. But our motivation for what we're doing and our perspective in what we're doing is going to be different. And so I think that when we realize that and we take that bird's eye view, it makes it easier to appreciate others, because let's say I am interacting with an ISTJ. As opposed to looking at them, like let's say Megan before knowing type, I would look at them and think, their priorities are all screwed up. Look at how bad their FE and NI are. What, like a waste of a person. How dare they? They're so undeveloped that their FE and their NI is just so bad. Like, how do you even live that way? But like, that could be sort of the perspective I could take. But then they're also looking at me like, how do you live that way? Your SI and TE are so bad. Like, how are you surviving? And I think the thing is that we all survive somehow. You know, there's conflict in the world, but we are able to use our functions to survive. And there are 8 different cognitive functions, and they all could be used to survive. And there are 16 personality types that we are different ways of carrying ourselves and having an ego. And it's only natural for our egos to bump heads with other people. But I think if we realize, okay, this is just my ego bumping heads with your ego, then it makes it a lot easier to deal with. Because if you can just imagine, what if I wasn't an ENxJ? What if I just was born into an ISTJ body? What if I was born into a body where my brain was predisposed to being very good at SI and TE? Okay, like think about it. Just really try and envision what that would be like with your conflictor or with whatever, someone who uses your blind spot. And if you're unsure what your blind spot is, I'm gonna put in the description, by the way, what that is to make it easy. But if you really think, okay, well, if I was born with super good SI, why wouldn't I use SI to get the job done? It just makes sense, right? And you have to realize that everybody is doing what makes sense to them, and everybody is doing the best that they can. But it only looks weird and it only looks confusing and annoying from our biased perspectives. And so let me know, is that liberating for you? Because it's liberating for me. And I know I'm not quite addressing the question head on, but I think that this is the first step to appreciating your blind spot function in other people. So another thing to look at, so Dave Superpowers talks about tidal waves, and I think that's a great phrase, and so I'm going to steal that phrase, is that you can type people over time by looking at their tidal waves. So he talks about it as though your first function, your dominant function is your savior, and your tertiary is, or not your tertiary, I'm sorry. Your dominant function is your savior, your inferior function is your demon. And so we are always putting so much attention on our savior. In other words, this could be called our dominant function in Myers-Briggs or socionics. This is our ego. Like, this really is our ego, I believe. We put so much attention on the ego. And other people have other egos where they're putting their attention on. And if we can begin to realize how irrational we are, then we can have more empathy for the irrationalities that other people have. Because, like, let's just take an example. For me, I just care what people think about me to a crazy extent. I am just if I have an unpopular opinion, it literally keeps me up at night. Like, I try and share my opinions on YouTube and stuff, but I'm still an FE dom, and I still get very stressed out whenever I will say things and then it causes a conflict, or if it's not understood completely. I just want to be on the same page with everyone, and I want everyone to get along, and I want there to be that harmony and all that. But what I've realized is that my desire for harmony and mutual benefit is sort of an obsession. It's sort of my drug, you know? Like, it's sort of crazy if you think about it, because how is anyone ever going to share their own opinions and be their own person or get the job done if we're so hung up and what people think, you know? Like, and so once I realize the areas in which I'm crazy, then it makes me judge people less for the areas in which they are. So for example, I think it's ridiculous when I see SI users getting really caught up in how things used to be, or in a particular thing that they've done before. It could feel like they're hanging on to like this security blanket that I just don't understand. For example, at work, I think a lot of people run into this at work, where there's a system that has always worked for 100 years, and then there's sort of this new world that we are trying to move our way into, where, for example, I work in social media. I work with a lot of people who are Gen X, baby boomers, who have worked in media for a long time. And I noticed that the SI users in that space have a really hard time moving on to something new, where I have almost like this extreme faith in what is new, and I can almost seem like I'm just bulldozing onto them with ideas, I feel, because I trust the NI, and I'm just like ready to just like let go of this SI, and I understand that this is just a natural friction that happens, and it's not anybody's fault. I mean, my boss is an ESxJ, and I appreciate the SI and what she does, because she, for example, really wants to make sure that she doesn't make she knows the sensitivities that other people might have to change. And she knows really how to negotiate in a way that isn't going to feel like you're ripping the baby blanket out of someone's hands. She knows how to negotiate in a way where it's slow and it makes people comfortable. And she's always like saying like baby steps. And I'm like, okay, baby steps. And it's like, stressful to me at some point, or sometimes. But you know, SI is really good at understanding that people, you know, can be fearful, and that change doesn't happen overnight, and they want to work within the system to change the system. Whereas sometimes NI and SE wants to just shatter a paradigm and just go on with it and get rid of what's not working, you know, and can feel very fast. And I think that that can feel very intense from an SI and NE perspective, where they are just wanting to take baby steps to work within the system to inch their way closer. Or sometimes SE and NI could be like, well, we don't have time. Like, we need to innovate or die. Innovate or die. Innovate or die. And it's like, that scares the SI and NE users sometimes. But also, SI and NE sort of doesn't feel that do or die pressure as often, in my experience. And so, for example, like, the reason why I brought up tidal waves earlier is because if I could begin to realize the ways that I overly attach to my dominant function, and I can get a little bit crazy, for lack of a better word, in my obsession with FE and also NI, both of which are my saviors, then yeah, it allows me to have more empathy for people who are obsessed with other functions that I don't happen to value. And now I look at it as just this obsession. I view it as this tidal wave. What are the areas in your life that are tripping you up time and time and time again because you are so focused on the one things? And so no matter what system you're using, I use FE and NI as my saviors, which are the direct opposite of TE and SI. And so TE and SI things are going to be the things that cause that tidal wave that trip me up time and time again. Like, I'm always going to be tripped up by things that require TE and SI. And Socionics mirrors this when it talks about, you know, my vulnerable function, my blind spot, my polar function is SI. Those are the things that are going to trip me up because I'm quite literally not paying attention. So everybody has that area, and you can begin if you can begin to see what are the problems that keep coming back. We can appreciate people who use our blind spot functions when we begin to see them as the answer to that problem. So here's an example. My uncle is an ESTJ, and he's my go-to guy whenever I have car issues. And I personally, I am someone that could put off dealing with things with my car a little bit longer than I should. And it's because I keep thinking, I don't have time right now, I have other things to do. And that's because for me, my NI things to do are always going to be more important on my priority list than any sort of SI things to do. I'm always going to be prioritizing reaching an intuitive, conceptual understanding about whatever it is I'm doing way more than I am going to be seeking homeostasis and stability in the sensory world. So that's my NI over SI. And so what happens is that I'm going about my day, I'm trying to understand concepts with NI, and then all of a sudden my car breaks down. Then what? You know? These are the problems that have plagued me my entire life. These sensory problems have always been my problems. I have a job and I want to impress my boss, and I have all these ideas, and then I forget one grammar thing that makes us look stupid. Like whenever I was a journalist, like I would have all these bright ideas about new ways to tell a story, and then I would literally spell someone's name wrong, and it would be like, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? Why am I so focused elsewhere that I can't even focus on these sort of SI things? And I think it helps to not be so hard on yourself and realize that, you know, I did miss that because I was focused on something else. And, you know, there's the whole idea of synergy in collaboration where 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2 when you can create groups together that work well together, that leverage each other's strengths, then we really can become something bigger than ourselves. Where what if I were to work with an SI user who, while I was focused on these big bright ideas, they were doing quality assurance, making sure that there wasn't any dumb mistakes in the sensory, you know, like I think that I really appreciate SI users a lot more once I started to realize that literally all of the problems that have been the problems that plague me for like my entire life are literally pieces of cake to them. And you know, I've known this too when talking to particularly INTJs, because we both share NI, but their blind spot is FE. So I've had a few INTJ friends that I would say about 5 in my life where they have asked me, you know, what do I do in this situation? You know, this people shit just stresses me out. I don't know what to do. And you know, it's really interesting to hear from the INTJs in particular, and how it can be hard for them to appreciate FE until they're in a spot where only FE can solve their problem. So I think that's really the thing, is that 99% of the time we move about life just sort of in autopilot, you know, using our functions that we love to use, until we get into the spot where it's like, fuck, like what am I supposed to do? Sorry for cussing. But it's like, we get in this spot and we're like, I don't know what to do. Or like, for me, it's like, maybe it's something in the sensory world, like either like, I don't know how to budget. I don't know how to keep track of my finances. I don't know how to make time in my day to, you know, food prep and like all of these things like in the sensory that are just so hard for me to understand. Like, I don't know how to be grounded. Like, what am I doing? Like, I'm just always going. I don't know how to relax. Like, what is that? Whereas an INTJ, they've been like, oh my goodness, I'm having this relationship problem. I don't know how to break it off with this partner of mine, or I don't know how to let someone know how I feel, or I don't know how to mend this conflict. Like, I don't know what to do. And in those situations where we're lost, it's like, sometimes what we do normally doesn't work. Sometimes if an INTJ was to use a TE approach on their relationship, it might not work. And, you know, if I were to just try and use NI and in being comfortable, it doesn't always work. And so that's why we either need to ask for help, or we need to be easier on ourselves. And I think asking for help could be a great solution, for just asking somebody who uses the function that you don't use, what would you do in this situation? You know, or can you help me with this? So yeah, hopefully this answers the question for how to appreciate the blind spots, because I think really, I guess my answer would be changing your mindset completely will help you to be able to better appreciate it, because we'll be able to see it completely differently. Like, for example, like my mom is an ESxJ, and I remember when I first moved out of my parents' house, I was really like, I was freaking out, like wanting to make sure I had enough money to buy the things that I needed, like the appliances, the, you know, kitchen supplies, and like all of that. And she took me to the dollar store and I got stuff. And she kept telling me, she was like, one day at a time. See, that's the thing ESFJs always tell me, is baby steps, one day at a time. Like, and it's like so hard for me to understand that. Like, I know it might seem really simple to some of you, especially if you use SI, but that's very hard for me to understand. And like my mom told me, she said that I was never going to feel like my home was homier enough, because there's always going to be things to add that is going to make it feel more like home. Because I was sort of like, oh my goodness, I don't even have a welcome mat. This isn't even a home. I'm whatever. And she was like, every paycheck, ask yourself, you know, is there something little that I can add to make this feel a little bit homier? You don't have to do it all at once. That's what she always tells me. You don't have to do it all at once. And, you know, I do wish that I could do it all at once, but sometimes I can't. And, you know, appreciating the little things and being grateful for those things, and seeing how SJs move about life and how they can sort of make do with what they have and then add a little bit more the next day and then more the next day. It's really inspiring. And I think, yeah, changing your mindset can help you view what they're doing as inspiring and not annoying. So I want to know, like, let's have a discussion. Do you feel like super annoyed by people that are using your blind spot function, your PoLR function? And what are some things that you have done to try and get past that? Because I understand that it could be very difficult. And you know, I'm still annoyed by SI. I don't have all the answers. I'm trying my best to be a little bit less annoyed. So yeah, I'd love to hear any stories from you all if you have tried to work past this yourself. And thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to join my Facebook group, that's actually where Joel, or was it Joel? Brent. I'm sorry. I forget who asked this question now. But this question was asked on my Facebook group. If you would like to, we have discussions in there. And I also am an attendant on a Discord server if you use Discord and would like to talk about personality there. And I am launching soon a typing service with me and a friend and potentially more friends. It's going to be sort of like a panel of like personality experts telling you what our opinion is, versus if you'd like to get objectively typed, you know, I would recommend going through Dave's Superpowers. But I do have a lot of people reaching out and asking me, like, what type am I? What type do you think I am? Like, I've had people say, I don't care how scientific it is, I just want to know your opinion. So I am working on doing something along those lines soon, once I feel like it could be ethical. And I know I keep saying this, but I actually am having a meeting with some people soon to discuss. So yeah, that link my point is that link is below if you would like to be notified when that's available. So thank you for watching and have a wonderful rest of your day.